Hi, my name is Nick Kardahji. I'm a researcher at the Trade Union Prospect. And what I wanted to sort of do this morning was touch on what I think are three of the key challenges for the energy sector moving forward, touching, I imagine, on many of the themes that have been picked up already by the other speakers. So just to sort of start off with, Prospect, for those who don't know, is a trade union that represents some of the professional and managerial specialists across the public and private sector. We have around 20,000 members working in the energy industry across all sectors, all subsectors of the energy industry, including the nuclear sector as well. We have a growing membership in the renewables industry too. And really, in terms of policy focus, we're sort of looking to sort of leverage the expertise of our members, who can be found in sort of grid control rooms, planning the development of wind farms, managing complex assets, and so forth, to really promote a sound and evidence-based approach to energy policy, which I imagine everyone in this room can agree is sorely lacking at the moment. So one of the first things I wanted to touch on, the first challenge I wanted to touch on, was the competition for talent looking ahead. As I'm sure will be familiar to many folks, there's a big demographic challenge facing the industry, not just the energy industry, but many other sectors of the economy too, but it's particularly acute in energy, and particularly in sort of STEM and engineering roles. Roughly 25% of all engineers in the power sector are 55 or older. At the same time, we've seen declining levels of training happening in the sector. This is something that our members talk about a lot at the moment. There are concerns about the lack of new apprentices and new trainees coming through. There's some new DFE data that came out. Actually, no, excuse me, we're waiting for updated stats from the DFE on this, but the most recent stats we have suggest that there's been a drop of about a third in new starts, new apprenticeship starts in the energy sector since 2015. At the same time, as Abby touched on, this is an industry that's obviously going through a tremendous amount of change and transition. There's a real need for new types of skills in the sector, particularly digital skills, data science skills, and so forth. And that's going to pose a real challenge for the sector. The sector is going to be competing with a range of other parts of the economy for those types of skills. And I think the question that we need to be asking ourselves is whether the energy sector is equipped to really compete for that talent. Diversity and inclusion, again, another big challenge. Abby touched on many of these points that I'm going to make now. I think it's fair to say the sector has a pretty poor record on diversity and inclusion at the moment, especially in specialist STEM roles. In the power sector, women are roughly a fifth of the workforce, and it's lower than that in the gas sector. And only around 5% of the workforce are from BAME backgrounds at present. There's also, I think, a real need to think about the types of workplaces and the nature of workplace culture in the energy sector. Prospect did a big piece of research on this last year, looking at harassment and bullying in a variety of different workplaces. And for the energy sector, 60% of the women who responded to the survey said they had experience of different forms of harassment in their workplaces. And that's something that we need to take very seriously and think about carefully in terms of how we respond to that. Certainly that needs to be part of our thinking if we're going to attract women and present this industry as one that is friendly and welcoming to people from all backgrounds. So clearly there's a need to do a lot more on diversity and inclusion in the sector. And then lastly, I wanted to touch on the health and safety dimension as well, the need to create healthy and safe workplace conditions, which I think is interrelated with the question of skills and training and also diversity and inclusion. The industry has an improving safety record, certainly in terms of physical safety, but I think at the same time there's a growing crisis around mental ill health in the industry that's not really being addressed and tackled robustly enough. We did another piece of research focused on our members in the energy sector roughly a year ago, and around 1 in 3 of the respondents to that survey said that they described their sort of working conditions on a daily basis as feeling overwhelmed or extremely stressed at work most of the time at work. And roughly 3/4 described their workload as either heavy or extremely heavy. So I think there is a real crisis going on in terms of stress and mental ill health, and that is, I think, going to be an important part. That's going to be something that we're going to need to tackle and take seriously. As I think has been picked up in some of the reporting on the renewables industry, there are question marks over the quality and nature of work in the renewables industry at the moment. There's a lot of positive steps being taken to address health and safety, but it's still the case that the accident rate in offshore wind, for example, is roughly 3 times higher than it is in offshore oil and gas, and that's something that I think we again need to take seriously. So it probably won't surprise you to learn that as a representative from a trade union, I think trade unions have a role to play here. I think employee voice does matter and it is going to be an important part of the solution to addressing the skills challenge and also to improving equality and diversity in the industry. Trade unions already play a big role in promoting training and education at a national level through initiatives like Unionland. The TUC has also been heavily involved in the development of the new national retraining scheme as well. There's also a wealth of evidence that shows that unionized workplaces tend to have higher training rates and higher quality levels of training. But I think we also have a role to play in improving equality and diversity and inclusion in the sector as well. There's some research from Incomes Data Research on this that, for example, that unionized workplaces tend to have lower gender pay gaps than non-union workplaces, and I think that's related to a variety of things, but in particular, I think it's related to the fact that trade unions are often involved in helping to promote pay transparency. And more broadly, I think there's a wealth of evidence too that giving people a voice at work, helping to improve engagement between the workforce and management, as I say, improves training rates, but it also leads to better health and safety outcomes, and it also leads to higher levels of productivity and higher levels of workplace morale as well. So I think there's a real need for unions to be part of the solution to these issues, and certainly Prospect is keen to engage productively and positively with employers to tackle some of these challenges. Thanks very much.